Today we're going to be talking about dandelion wine. It's something that I had been wanting to make for quite some time now. I did some research on the internet hoping to find an older recipe, maybe one that was consistent with how they might have made it several hundred years ago, but nothing I found really seemed to look like it was that ancient, and the ones that were more crude looked like they would produce a beverage that was very crude, and in the end I decided to go with a more modern recipe. One of the challenges that I faced was that a lot of the people of a certain age that I would talk to about dandelion wine who actually had any experience with it would remember that aunt or grandmother who always seemed to have a bottle in the back of the cupboard. And the one thing that seemed unanimous among them was that they absolutely hated it. So there was something that I needed to try to figure out why theirs seemed to taste so bad and how I could get beyond that. So I made my first batch and it actually turned out pretty good. And now I'm starting my second batch. So bear with me and let's see how it comes out. Look for a field that is untouched during the growing season. Dandelions around my area seem to peak roughly the second week of April into maybe early May, and then they're pretty much gone. They've all turned white. Typically, you want to avoid your front yard as a source for dandelions because often that's a source for pesticides or other harmful chemicals. And also, typically, your front yard gets cut at least once, thus greatly inhibiting the ability for dandelions to reach their full size. You want to try to find the largest dandelion heads you can, and the roundest ones, and preferably ones that haven't started turning yet. This one here is nice. It's pretty good sized. It's pretty round. But clearly this one's better. It's nearly the size of my palm. Not every dandelion head is going to look anything near like that, so don't waste too much time trying to find only the hugest ones, but look. And then just reach under and pick the heads right off. Try to leave the stalks behind if you can, and don't be afraid to move around the field to get better bunches. There are a lot of dandelion heads in this bucket. This is a 5-gallon bucket, but the thing about dandelion heads is that they're very light and fluffy. So the more you pick, the more the ones on the bottom get compressed. So don't be discouraged if your bucket doesn't look full, yet you feel like you've been picking forever. This is the tough part. We need to separate the yellow frond from the green bulb at the base of each dandelion head. As best as possible, you want to keep all the yellow and bring forward no green. Rationally, you're not going to get 100%, but give it your best shot. I find that basically if I pinch the base and then sweep the fronds up into the other hand, I can generally separate them pretty easily. But it gets very, very tedious. You'll notice that I have a bottle of last year's dandelion wine to help me get through it. I also tried scissors. Grab the yellow part of the fronds, use the scissors to snip the bulb off, which all I can say is that's another way of doing it. My hand got very fatigued using the scissors relatively quickly, so I kind of gave up on that and went back to just using the pinch method. Okay, we'll get these in the freezer and get the rest of the dandelions next week. A week has passed and I have collected the rest of the dandelion fronds. I have a kilogram of dandelion fronds, which is a rather arbitrary number. I've heard people suggest 3 kilograms for a 5-gallon batch, and I've heard people suggest less. Here I have 5 gallons of water with 7 pounds of cane sugar and 7 pounds of honey coming up to steeping temperature, which I will then drop on top of the dandelions. The dandelion fronds and the sugar water are now infused. Everything is dissolved. I also should note that I put in a 1/4 teaspoon of sodium metabisulfite to kind of knock off some of the nasties. Okay, it's evening now. The first part I did this morning. You can see that the dandelion fronds are already starting to discolor. They're starting to lose their yellow. This is expected. And so now I have the juice of 2 lemons and 2 oranges. I have the zest of 2 lemons and 2 oranges. And into the juice, I put a pound of unsulfited raisins and threw it in the blender for just a few seconds to kind of chop the raisins up a little bit. And now I'm just going to add these ingredients into the must here and let it sit for at least 48 hours. Done. Gonna let it steep for a couple of days and we'll take it from there. Okay, it's Friday morning. Remembering that I started this Tuesday morning, so we've got 3 days of steeping time in this original vessel. I'm just doing a straight rack of the liquid, and the fronds and raisins and the zest from the lemons and oranges in the muslin bag. I have a small press that I'm actually just pressing that out of. It's perfectly fine just to squeeze the bag to the extent that you want, but I wanted to get just a little bit extra out of it, so I'm using the press. There's no obligation to have or use a press. I just happen to have it, so I'm using it. Anyways, over here I have some yeast starting. I'm using AWRI 350 yeast. You can use any wine yeast you want. It doesn't matter. It just happens that this is the one that I had. So getting the fermentation going starting today. I'll take a hydrometer reading in a moment. Okay, so what I did was I splashed the entire contents of the bucket in between these 2 buckets 5 or 6 times to get some aeration going. I put in a 1/4 teaspoon of diammonium phosphate and 6 teaspoons of fermentation nutrient at the recommended 1 teaspoon per gallon rate. Check the gravity. It's 1.112, which is exactly the range that I was expecting it to be in. I was very happy about that. And so now it's just a matter of putting the cover on the bucket and walking away. So we'll see. It's been a couple of days since we last checked in, and the temperature in the basement is around 65. And so right now we've got fermentation started, going slow and low. Thanks for watching.